last week on Friday, we were talking about this GB News article that went out. Fury as more than 1 million pro-Palestine protesters set to march through London on Armistice Day. And the key word here was fury. There's clearly some fury being built up or attempted to be built up at the moment. Here's Richard Tice responding to Patrick Henry. Patrick Henry on Twitter saying, "A right-wing nutter like you would just love a war between our police and Palestinian protesters." And Richard Tice replying, "So you're happy with their anti-Semitic chants, abuse and violence? Do you condemn Hamas?" And my question for the last number of weeks has been, have the protests, the pro-Palestinian protests, been full of anti-Semitic chants and violence? Let's look at another tweet from Andrew Neil. This time, calls for violent uprising against Israel, plus anti-Semitic placards featured in central London pro-Palestinian protests yet again today. So he tweeted this out on Saturday. A woman in Trafalgar Square with a placard showing image of Star of David being thrown in a dustbin, slogan, "Let's keep the world clean." Demonstrators allowed to take over nearby Charing Cross Station, shouting "River to the Sea," a destruction of Israel chant. Banner depicted swastika and Israeli flag with the caption, "If I don't steal it, somebody else is going to steal it," Israeli proverb. So the narrative from certain people is that what was going on in the protests over the last number of weeks has been the language of violence and the language of extremism. So we thought we needed to find out exactly what the situation is. Bryan and I went, therefore, on Saturday. We met up with Ben Rubin to go and have a look and see what was actually going on in Trafalgar Square on Saturday. Well, really, the picture was somewhat different. Quite a number of thousands of people there of all kinds. The banners largely, there were some banners that were...
Well, we got some images of some of the other banners.
Yes, we got some banners that were perhaps perceived to be more extreme, but actually the majority was stop the genocide and this type of narrative. Then we've got one here from the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions. They were represented at the protest on Saturday. Another one here, Jews Against the War on Gaza, represented at the protest on Saturday. So really, the narrative that we have been presented with in the mainstream press is not correct. And we want to demonstrate that now in the next few minutes, because this is what we witnessed.
And we also want to dig into why people would want to distort what the reality is. But let's have a look at the demonstration in Trafalgar Square. This is a video just giving a feel for the number of people. And I will say that Mike and myself and Ben Rubin split up at one point. We took ourselves as individuals into the middle of that crowd in order to speak to people and get some interviews for the UK column today. Let's have a look at what it looked like. So there we are. As individuals, we took ourselves into that crowd. We had nothing to identify us. We weren't carrying anything which identified us as UK column, but we took the opportunity to walk up to people, to ask them why they were there, and to see what response. I took quite a lot of little video clips, and we're going to play 3 of those clips now. Very different people, very different comments in some ways, but of course what everybody was desperate to do was to stop the violence in Gaza as soon as possible. So let's listen to the...
Well, we should just say these are audio clips with some images over them, because we were mainly just recording an audio, but let's have a look at the first one.
So I've come over to Nelson's column, and I'm with a family, I think.
Yeah, 2 families.
Two families. So I'm going to start off with you, if I may. Tell me why you're here. What are you concerned about, and why have you come?
just from a humanitarian point of view, I think everyone's in agreement. What happened on October 7th was despicable act, but the response has been totally disproportionate. And at what cost is it that Israel feels the job will be done, and how many Palestinian lives will have to die or lose their life in order for that to say the response was adequate and job done? Because all they are doing is just recruiting the next level of Hamas, and if it's not Hamas, it'll be another group. 50% of the population of Gaza are under 16, they're children. They weren't even born when Hamas was around. And people need to understand that. And now it's a case of, we know that what was done is wrong, but your response, and as a sovereign country, that's one of the fourth biggest military powers in the world, they should have a lot more better means at their disposal to be able to deal with this.
Okay, and what amongst the people here today, there are some Jewish people who are Jews for peace, and I've spoken to them as well. What message would you give to people in the Jewish community?
Jewish, Muslim, Sikh, Hindu, Christian, it doesn't matter. From a humanitarian point of view, a lost life is a lost life. And we're all in unison. What is sad is the conflation of trying to criticize Israel and being accused of anti-Semitism, and that is held back. A lot of people are weary of saying things, but it shouldn't be the case. And there's many a march and demonstration in Israel against what they believe their government are doing, and even here, the Jewish voices that are voicing their voice in unison with ourselves and every other community here, saying it's wrong. And it shouldn't be. But the sad thing is, they're being labelled by other Jews as being self-hating Jews.
So that was a very nice family group. I took the opportunity to stay with them a little bit longer. I spoke to some of the ladies in that group as well, but we've only got so much time. We will be looking to put out all of the audio clips for our UK column viewers and listeners. So look out for that in the next couple of days. Let's move on to the next one, another viewpoint from somebody in that crowd. I'm here on the far side of the crowd, and I've got two gentlemen, and the flag is Palestine Islamic Human Rights Commission. And that's the website address, www.ihrc.org.uk. Okay, can I ask you why you're here?
We are here for Palestine. We, Islamic Human Rights Commission, is standing for Palestinian for a very long time. We are here to create awareness that Islamic Human Rights Commission support oppressed people of Gaza, and we are against the oppression and occupation, brutal occupation of Israeli army of the occupied land.
Right. So, if you could make the decision, what would you like to see happen today?
The first is an immediate ceasefire. And Israel and Israeli officials should be tried, including United Nations, British government, French government, and Israelis, American, USA. They should be tried in a war criminals. They are the war criminals. They are supporting the genocide. The American, British providing the bombs to kill innocent children all around, especially in Gaza. So far, 4,000 has been killed by the British bombs and the USA provided. So they are the one who basically funded this genocide, and they are supporting apartheid of modern age.
Okay.
Apartheid.
Thank you for that. I've spoken to a lot of people already this afternoon, and amongst all the people here is a group calling themselves Jews for Peace.
Yes.
And they were very interested to speak to. What would your message be to people in Israel?
We have no problem with the Jews. Jews are one of the very Abrahamic religion, very old. We respect them. Moses is one of our prophet. We have no problem. We have a problem with the Zionist entity, which is occupying the land. We have no problem with Jews in even for thousands of years, Jews, Muslims, and Christians were living together. So there was no problem. Since this Zionist entity came in to exist, the problem began from that time. So we have no problem with the Jews. And there are a number of Jews around here, and they support. We have rabbis here as well, so it's nothing against Jews or anti-Semitic or anything. We are here for a peace. We are supporting the oppressed people of Palestine.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Now, I'll just add to that one that it was extremely noisy in that demonstration, and Mike was able to clean up those audio clips. So if it sounds unnaturally clear, that was because we've had to do some work to make it properly audible for our viewers and listeners today. So that was another opinion from within an organisation. Now let's go to yet another man speaking.
No good can come out of this war. Vengeance cannot be the answer. It's not that this conflict started on the 7th of October, which is the narrative we get. Hamas started it, and we have to defend ourselves. There is a long history before the 7th of October of occupation, repression of Palestinians, and so on. I totally condemn what Hamas did in killing civilians and in taking hostages, but it didn't come from nowhere. The Israeli state has over 5,000 political prisoners, many of them held without trial or accusation. They are hostages in any other name. This is a dirty conflict, and Israel has more power, overwhelmingly more power than any other actor in that situation. And therefore I hold Israel responsible for what is happening and cannot see that out of this war, anything but destruction and vengeance. They are recruiting the next generation of Hamas fighters.
Right, thank you very much for that. Now, your banner says Jews against the war on Gaza.
Indeed.
Can you tell me about that organisation? Who are the Jews that are speaking out?
The Jews, it's an organisation called Jews for Justice for Palestinians. It was formed in 2002 at the start of the Second Intifada, when Israel was saying, and Jewish communal institutions were saying, we stand by Israel, we're all for Israel. We said, no, not in our name.
Yes.
And organizations like us grew up at that time, particularly in South Africa, Canada, Australia, France, and elsewhere. And we stand with Jews who do not see this as providing safety or security for Jews or for anyone else.
Okay, and can I ask, are you Jewish yourself?
I am, absolutely. Yes.
And what reaction do you get from, there's a very mixed group of people here. What sort of reaction are you getting from Palestinians and pro-Palestinian?
Overwhelmingly friendly and favourable. Dozens, hundreds of people have come up to me on demonstrations like this to say, thank you for being here. And all I can say is, don't thank me, it's the least I, as a Jew, whose family lost many members in the Holocaust, it's the least I can do.
So we found very interesting people speaking there. We did select those 3 clips for the news. We are going to put all the clips that we took in the day up, as I said, for people to be able to listen to. But those are the sorts of comments that we were getting. And as we mixed amongst the crowds, if we just bring a couple of images back on screen, people were talking, they were moving through that very packed crowd. They were unbelievably polite. Some people had children with them. There were some banners that came in with a different slant on them, nothing too excessive in my mind, but we're now forced to ask, are messages like this, which I've described as raw, is this to be hate speech in the future, which is to be banned? But the clear message for people, really nice people, was that they were desperate for a ceasefire now to stop the deaths. They wanted an end to the killing of the children in their thousands in Gaza, and the killing of children in Israel, and they were very happy to make their feelings felt. But let's have a look at this picture, which fascinated me, because as I moved over towards Nelson's column, there at a local pub, I saw some members of the Royal Navy. They were having a drink and relaxing after their formal duties as part of the Cenotaph parade. They were only yards away from the demonstration. They were completely relaxed and happy. And later on, some of those men departed from that pub and walked through the edge of the crowd. And my point is that, of course, that crowd cannot have been the immensely dangerous crowd that GB News and others would have us believe if members of the armed forces in uniform were able to freely walk amongst them. So I'll leave you to reflect on that point. But the other issue was the police. And I will say that the police were mostly okay when we left, and that was before the interaction and altercation with the police started. We also met some police who'd come from Wales. They'd been drafted in for Wales. They were exceptionally friendly and polite. But I have to say that members of what I believe were the tactical support group were sullen. They were very hostile, and they treated anybody who tried to speak to them with utter contempt. I was actually appalled, and I'm going to say it was obvious to me that they were fearful, and this is why they were so aggressive. I believe that they've got a head full of fear because it's been put there in police training. Now, on that issue, I'd like to take people back to 2015, when we were getting very interested in stories which were emerging that Metropolitan Police were going to Israel in order to receive training. This was one particular report, but if I go to something more substantial, I'm going to bring in this one here, International Business Times. Israeli army trained London police in tactics and strategy during the Gaza crisis, says report. And the investigation report said that between the 1st of March and 31st of August, at least 80 personnel working for London's Metropolitan Police had travelled to Israel for a tactics and strategy meeting. Now, this was never pinned down. We were never able to pin it down, although there were some denials that have appeared on social media. But this report said that according to Iran Efrati, an investigative researcher into the Israeli military, Israel's training of American police is dangerous. Their methods are developed in a context where the citizens are seen and treated as an enemy to be crushed, highlighting the dangers of US police being trained by Israel. Efrati, who has served in the Israeli army, explains in a video that when your police come back, you become their enemy. Now, if anybody's got any further information on this, I would certainly like to know, but it seems to be very important. And I'm just going to add that as we look to the post-demonstration reports, this was the BBC here. It came up with a generalized report. It does talk about the number of people killed in Israel. It talks about Israeli airstrikes killing more than 9,000 people. It includes a quote from the chief rabbi who said that the line between protesters supporting innocent Palestinians and backing Hamas had become badly blurred. But in fact, there was no substance about the people on the demonstration at all. It's taken UK Column to get amongst those people and to help them get their views out. This is the journalist who wrote that vacuous report, and she advertises herself as a mum. And I just wonder why a Wimbledon mum would not care about stopping the killing of 4,000 dead children in Gaza. But it goes on, because this was the Sunday Express, my terror over race hate mobs. And this story is apparently about a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor, revealing that he's so frightened he's been forced into hiding. And my question is this a 93-year-old man who is actually terrorized, or is it a 93-year-old man terrorized by his memories and his belief in deliberately alarmist and fear-mongering headlines? Or maybe it's a combination of both. I'll leave the audience to think about that. Here's the Sunday Telegraph. Now it gets interesting, because basically we've got a headline: Met police advisor led from the river to the sea chant. Apologies, this is a little bit blurred, but basically it talks about a gentleman called Malik, a solicitor, who the police have used through his this organisation, the London Muslim Communities Forum, in order to advise them. But apparently he's now a turncoat. But we've seen with the prevent strategy accusations that the police themselves were helping to ramp up violence, and I wonder whether it could be the same thing. But the other comment we need to make here is that we've also got this large image. This is the Duchess of Edinburgh in what I'm calling Glamo Camo. And of course, she's been off to Canada. So the story overshadowed by the glamour in camouflage jacket. And if we look at their Sunday Telegraph magazine, we've got the front page here with a big image of the king turning 75. But oh dear, he's just got one son by his side. So this is very much pulling the heartstrings of the nation. But let's remember, this king is working for the globalist agenda and the World Economic Forum rather than looking after his subjects. But if we get into this magazine, then it starts to get really dangerous as far as I can see, because we've got Zoe Strimpel saying that Germany puts Britain to shame with its zero tolerance of anti-Semitism. And I'll just put this on screen so you can freeze it, but there's some talk about it. But the key quote is, we're not going to accept anti-Semitism, whoever defines that. That's not going to be tolerated in, quote, any form whatsoever. So somebody's suggesting we should be more like the Germans. I wonder how many people attending the cenotaph would agree with that. But if we look at this article in more detail, there's a mind game going on here, because you've seen the serious headline, Germany puts Britain to shame. But look at the other headlines that are brought in alongside it. Fake nipple bra brings cheeky back to women's sexuality. And the other one, my new man has let it be known he's a bit kinky in bed. Should I be scared? This is deliberately playing with people's minds. And of course, the newspapers know exactly what they're doing. So UK Column is going to end this segment by saying our experience of London, despite the troubles that took place later, did not match the peaceful response from the majority, the overwhelming majority of the protesters.
Of course, Trafalgar Square was not the only place that marches were taking place. This is Glasgow, I believe. Well, Bryan Simpson here tweeting out incredible scenes in Govan as punters come out of the pub to support the Free Palestine protest. So that was Glasgow. Then in Washington, D.C., we had lots, and even Israel, as was mentioned by one of the people speaking in Israel, protests outside Netanyahu's home is how it was being described. This is clearly a global issue. It has become a global issue for people, and people making their feelings understood. So let's come back to this. This was Douglas Murray. We pointed this tweet out on Friday. UK Hamas supporters are now planning a 1 million-man march in Remembrance Day. This is, of course, this coming weekend. And it isn't on Remembrance Day. It's on Armistice Day, which is Saturday. They plan to defame our war dead and desecrate the cenotaph itself. I'd like to know how he knows that. But anyway, this fear of what's going to happen this weekend is being ramped up with a view to bringing people out on the streets. And he actively says at the end, if such a march goes ahead, then the people of Britain must come out and stop these barbarians. So he is actively calling for people out on the streets to start a war between the pro-Palestinian protesters and the others, everybody else. This is becoming sort of a race issue almost for some in the mainstream Twitter sphere. And here is Lawrence Fox, if you remember, with this. So it's becoming something around our veterans and around the need to protect the memory of people that have died in conflict on behalf of the United Kingdom. This is Ezra Levant pushing out a tweet with quoting Andy NGO there. Breaking anti-Israeli protesters rushing towards the Cenotaph War Memorial in London. So this was a group of people running towards the War Memorial in the evening on Saturday that were carrying Palestinian flags. We don't know if they were actually Palestinian protesters or if they were agents of the state working agent provocateur, as it were. We have no way of knowing that. But of course, the narrative comes out, we've got to protect the Cenotaph. And so the question then is, Oh, and Nigel Farage, of course, again, our nation and its values are being destroyed before our eyes. The Met Police and the government will not stand up for us. I've never felt more depressed about our once lovely country. So again, this is really inciting people to come out on the streets. So let's have a look at whether this march is going to be allowed to go ahead at the weekend. First of all, we've got Suella Braverman again.
Pro-Palestine marches planned for Armistice Day. You don't want those to go ahead by the sounds of it, do you?
The police are operationally independent, so it's up to them in the first instance to use their operational judgment based on the facts and the circumstances as they assess them to be, to put in an application for a ban of any particular march to me as Home Secretary, and I will consider that application as they put it to me. It's got to be based on their assessment and their belief that there's a risk of serious disorder. What we've seen in the last few weeks is tens of thousands of people take to the streets of Britain chanting jihad, calling for the erasure of Israel and behaving in many instances in a flagrantly anti-Semitic manner. To me, those are incredibly offensive and utterly odious behaviour.
So that's what she claims, but she claims operational independence for the police and so on. Well, is that true? Well, apparently not, because here is a letter that was sent by Rishi Sunak to the Chief Constable of the Metropolitan Police, talking about the Remembrance Weekend coming up. I'm deeply concerned that a number of protests are currently planned to disrupt those acts of remembrance next weekend. The planned protests on Armistice Day is provocative and disrespectful, and there's a clear and present risk that the cenotaph and other war memorials could be desecrated, something that would be an affront to the British public and the values we stand for. What evidence has he for this? But I'm not going to read the whole letter by any means. He then goes on to talk about the legislation which the police could use. And then he ends by claiming once again that, of course, the police are operationally independent from politicians. But as a politician, he is basically demanding that the police take action on this. So the incitement continues. Here's Richard Tice. Just bring this back on screen again. Are we happy with their anti-Semitic chants, abuse and violence? Well, I think we have seen for ourselves that those anti-Semitic chants and abuse do not exist. Then we've got Katie Hopkins here and Tommy Robinson back on Twitter just at the right moment for this time.
Wind it up.
To wind it up, yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's just remind ourselves of the question here. And the question is, are these people our enemy? Because if we look at this, never again means never again for anyone is the banner right in the center of that. And my question is, are these people the enemy? Or is this person the enemy? This is Rishi Sunak. What about this person? Is he our enemy? What about this person, Grant Shapps? Is he our enemy? Well, these three have been absolutely funding the wars right across the world for many, many years with their colleagues. They seem much more of an enemy to me. Is Suella Braverman our enemy? How about Ursula von der Leyen? I think she's probably our enemy. Bill Gates?
Certainly our enemy.
Klaus Schwab? The question here is, who should we be considering our enemy to be? And if we consider our enemy to be the ordinary people, no matter what their views are, whether we agree with them or not, if we consider ordinary people to be our enemy, when we're in the face of a regime globally, which is creating wars around the world, and really doesn't care whether any one of us lives or dies, that has vaccinated us, locked us down, and has treated us equally, whether we are Muslim, Christian, black, white, whatever we are, we've been treated the same, whether we're living in Israel or in the UK, we've been treated the same by these people. And the question is, who is our enemy? And I think we're falling into a pretty major trap if we assume that the people that are ordinary people coming out Trafalgar Square, wherever they happen to be, are our enemy. Perhaps it's the people in the suits and ties. Bryan, sorry.
Well, I don't have any problem with this. We've had a front cover of the UK column from many years ago, which showed some of the people in a cartoon, of course, and identified them as domestic terrorists. But I think it's very interesting that in our chat box today, people are talking about the press. They are now talking about the lies of the press, and they're also saying we are being played. That's what our audience is echoing back to us today, and that is absolutely right. And you're just about to feature one man who's played the audience for a very long time, Mike.
Well, indeed. So let's bring Nigel Farage on screen again. What did he say last week? He said, "Now I've said it before, to great criticism, that there are a lot of people coming into Britain with whom we have no shared history and no shared culture." The no shared culture thing, okay, but the no shared history, well, many of these people absolutely do share a history with Britain, because quite a number of them are people that have been on the receiving end of British colonialism over the decades and the centuries. They certainly have a shared history with us. But the point here is that these are not the enemy. Just to mention Katie Hopkins again, of course, a lot of this debate is about this issue of the erasure of Israel. And it is amusing to me, ironic, let's say, that many of the people who are concerned about the calls for the erasure of Israel are saying that this represents ethnic cleansing in the Middle East. These same people would be the people that would very much like to see immigrants removed from the UK. And it seems like it's the same kind of narrative to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how it seems to me. So I'm going to say we are being played. And let's just keep in mind, of course, that we are on the receiving end. We've been talking about it at the UK column for years. We have been at the receiving end for a very long time of applied behavioral psychology, political psychology, mass propaganda. Just remember Spy B, a substantial number of people still do not feel sufficiently personally threatened. This was with respect to COVID-19. What happens if the same policy is used with respect to immigration or with respect to Israel and wars in Ukraine and wherever it happens to be? What happens to people? They start thinking the wrong kind of way, in my opinion. We are looking at the Clash of Civilizations policy. And what's really interesting is, to me, over the last couple of years, a lot of the sort of ideologies of left and right politics and so on have been set aside with respect to COVID-19 and lockdown and these kinds of issues. And Ukraine, even, we started to see people from the left and the right coming out to demand a stop, an end to the Ukraine war. This issue has put people back in their silos, and I think people really need to be very, very careful about that. This is the Clash of Civilizations policy, I believe, that we're witnessing at the moment, and we would be very foolish to fall for it.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that, Mike, and I've talked about this before, but I think it's a really important point. For people who are worried about immigration, and there are many long-established immigrants in this country who are also worried about immigration, my key question to a very big and quite tough audience in the Midlands was, how did these people get in the country? And the audience didn't answer me. I had to ask the question 3 times. How did they get into the country? I prompted, did they fight their way ashore? But eventually somebody said, we let them in. And I asked who let them in. And that audience could eventually tell me the people who let them in were the politicians. And I asked if the politicians were the enemy or the people that had been invited in. It then went deathly quiet. And this brings us back to the faces that you've had on screen. It's time for people in UK to understand that bad decisions they have made, we have made over the years, are now coming back to haunt us. And we need to deal with the people who are creating this mayhem, which is a combination of the politicians with non-government organisations and big corporations.
And the media.
Pardon?
And the media.
And the media. It's very clear. So we're being tough today, but I'm just going to say thank you to everybody that we reacted with in that demonstration. And when we came to go home, it was exceptionally busy on the Underground. We ended up packed into a carriage which was certainly full, all sorts of colours, races, religions, and everybody was still very polite, and some of them talking about what had taken place. So the majority of people, very, very well behaved, peace-loving, and this hype by the media to get people at each other's throats is truly horrific.
Okay, let's change the topic completely.